What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Fish the Moment Patreon only live stream. Really excited to talk to you guys again. Been a little bit of a while since I got to talk to you guys last. I haven't been making as many videos as I've been wanting to lately, but I did get to see a lot of guys at my Sam Rayburn Bass Camp, which is really fun, which I was at just last week. And so I've been doing a lot of Fish the Moment stuff, and I've also been filming some really cool new videos that I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about that's going to be really cool. And then I've also have a content strategy plan for February where I'm going to start putting out 3 videos a week every single week. And I basically am just taking the time to get fully prepared so that when I start that process, I will not have any hiccups. I'm going to do all of my stuff like getting taxes done, helping everything out with my mom, getting moved to a new place for her, and so all kinds of stuff. So again, appreciate the time that you guys are giving me with the videos and the patience. I got a lot of great comments on my last live stream for Patreon, as well as my last video that I put out about my channel updates. So again, thanks to all you guys on Patreon. It is awesome. And so tonight I am really excited to break down some of your questions that you put on the Patreon page. And before we jump into that, there are a couple things I do want to run through, because there are some things that I've done recently that a few guys may have not seen on the Patreon page. Again, not been as consistent on the page as I would like to be, just given all the stuff in my personal life. And so I want to make sure that you guys know what I'm doing on the page and kind of see if you're taking advantage of all the stuff that's available. And so let me jump over to the display capture over here. One second. There we go. So what I want to show you guys is really quick. Let's get this here. There we go. Okay. So I want to show you guys a couple things. So first up, I did do a Patreon exclusive video for all my Patreon members who are in the $20 tier, the bronze backer tier and above. And I did see that a lot of guys did watch the video, but there were only 17 views. And so I think if you guys haven't checked out this video, and it is a video on when to fish areas based on what you see on your fish finder, on your graph. And so it's a 30-minute video where I walk through a ton of different sonar images showing you what I'm seeing in this image, whether you should fish this area, whether you shouldn't, things like that. And so it's a really good video, and it's Patreon exclusive for all my $20 tier and up. So bronze backers, fence pandas, and Slaunch donkeys. And so that is something that I'm offering there. I also have the live stream that I did last month in December. I had some technical issues because I was over at my mom's house rather than in my place for the holidays, and so I'm back at my normal setup here, so no technical difficulties to start out today, fortunately. But I do have a live stream that I recorded and I put up onto the Patreon page. If you go back in some of the posts, you'll find that. And then for everyone who's in my Fence Panda and Slaunch Donkey tiers, I did publish a breakdown of all of my fishing areas for November and December, and I'll be doing this every single month for those tiers. And so if you are in that tier and you haven't seen this yet, I did post it just a couple days ago, and what it is basically an overview of every single area I fished and caught a bass in November and December. I give little placement markers of what the spots were, as well as a description of the areas, and this is 23 pages of just spots. So it's every area where I caught fish, and I'm going to be doing that every single month going forward. And so in this breakdown, you have Table Rock Lake, Grand Lake, Beaver Lake, Lake Tenkiller, and Lake Hamilton. So 3 different states. I'll also be doing everything from my bass camp, and I'll show you all the spots I was catching on Sam Rayburn, and just every single month where I'm catching my fish and a breakdown of that. So definitely check that out if you do, or if you are interested in that and you are in that tier. And so good to see everyone on the stream. Let's see who we got here. So we got Bob, we got Dan, Park, and then Richard, and Roger. Good to see you guys. Mike and Clint, how's it going, guys? Good to see everyone on the stream. So that's just kind of a couple things I want to show you guys, and I've been actually making some really cool videos recently that I'm hopefully going to be putting together. A couple things I've actually been working on is trying to get my plan for 2020 together. And so one thing I'm gonna do is actually doing some underwater footage. And what I've been doing, guys, is actually rented out space at a local college to use their swimming pool. And I actually go into the pool and I stand on one end of the pool over here, make a long cast into the diving end where it's 13 feet deep, and then I'm using a lot of different baits and testing out the actions on a long cast. So for example, what does a Keitech swim bait look like underwater versus a $2 cheap swim bait? Or what does a chatterbait look like underwater at 13 foot? How slow should you be reeling that chatterbait? What weight chatterbait should you be using? All kinds of stuff. And the results from that are crazy. It's really, really interesting stuff. And so I have some underwater footage from that. Also have footage of me actually making my casts. So I'm really excited for those videos to come out because it is definitely a really, really cool series. And that'll be launching here 1st of February. And I'll be doing a video in that series every week if you guys like it. So that is that. And then, I think there's a few other things I want to be doing. A couple other things. I do have some plans to start fishing some tournaments. I actually already earmarked 10 tournaments for this upcoming year. And so what that means is I'll be fishing 10 tournaments and filming my practice days, pre-tournament preparation, and tournament days. My goal is to try to win one tournament this year. And so I want to try to win one of those 10 tournaments. And they're pretty big tournaments. I'm going to be fishing some BFLs as well as some of the local, it's called the Beaver Lake Elite Series. It's like 100 boat, 150 boat fields, individual, just one angler in the boat fishing. And so I'm going to do all these like individual tournaments. And I may also jackpot like a team tournament if someone wants to fish with me for that too. So pretty excited about that. And I think it should be a really, really good year to come. So again, I should be getting out a lot more videos or starting to get out videos here starting 1st February and then 3 videos a week for the rest of the year. That's the goal. So I'm really excited about that. So anyways, you guys are probably done wanting to hear about all this stuff. I did want to give guys a chance to actually get into the stream. And so what I want to start doing, guys, is just rolling through your questions on my Patreon page and just kind of see what you guys are asking. Because there's a lot of great questions on here, and I want to make sure that I'm getting to everyone's questions. So first up, we have a question from Raymond France. And so Raymond, he's asking line/slack management on medium to long casts, especially with light lures weights that are hard to feel on the bottom. And so great question there. Ray, he's kind of asking, let's say you're fishing out here on Table Rock Lake and it's not Table Rock, there's Beaver. Table Rock Lake, let's say you're fishing out here and you're fishing off of a really long point and the tip of this point's in 30 or 40 foot of water and you're trying to fish a finesse bait, maybe a drop shot, maybe a light swim bait, something like that. And you can only get bites on really finesse baits. And maybe the wind's blowing 5, 6, 7 miles an hour, maybe 10 miles an hour, and you have a bunch of slack in your line. How do I deal with that? Well, a couple things that I do is usually when I'm having issues with the wind blowing my slack line around, that's usually a good indicator that the fish are going to be pretty aggressive, and I can actually catch those fish on moving baits. And so instead of trying to go with, let's say, a jig or a shaky head, something slow, in days when I'm having trouble with like the wind blowing my line around, I'm going to go for more like baits like a swim bait. I might fish a, let's say a crankbait, maybe a little bit heavier jig, something like that. But usually when that wind's blowing, the fish are going to be a lot more aggressive. And so you're not going to have to worry so much about trying to downsize and go to a really light line. Now, if you do have to switch down, let's say, and go like a little Ned rig and fish with fishing 40 foot of water with 6 pound tests to get those fish to bite, then in those situations, the one thing I will do is on my spinning rod, I'll actually tie a shorter leader on my spinning rod. And if you guys watch some of my videos, you'll know that I do a lot of videos, on my spinning rods, I tie braided line on my main spool. So I have my main spool as braid, and then I tie a leader using an FG knot. And usually my leader is anywhere from 15 to 20 feet long. But when I'm fishing super, super deep like that, and it's hard to feel the line, I'll just go to like a 5 or 6 foot leader. And that braid's more sensitive, so when those fish actually eat your bait, you can feel them a little bit better. And I also usually am going to be working that bait on a tight line. I'm not going to be working it with a big slack or bow in the line. I'm going to be working it kind of like a tight line technique. So I'm keeping as much contact with that bait as possible. And then the last thing that's kind of helpful is in those situations to actually fish with the wind at your back. And so what will happen is, let's say there's fish pulled up on these points. A lot of times you might think that you need to fish into the wind to control the boat position, and that's usually the case. But when I'm fishing with really light tackle, light lines, stuff like that, what I'll actually do is, let's say the wind is blowing really, really hard from the northeast over here. I'll actually put my boat on this side of this point right here and actually point the nose of my boat up towards the northeast and cast behind my boat with the wind. And so what that does is that the wind's at your back, and so there's not going to be much bow in your line, and you're going to be able to feel your bait a little bit easier as well. So just a few tricks in there, but usually when that wind is blowing, I am going to be going for a little bit more power approaches, maybe moving bait, stuff like that. And if you still want to go for that finesse approach and that wind's really blowing, one thing I've been throwing a lot this last year on Table Rock is a Menace grub. Oops, that's not how you spell Menace. Menace grub, and this is Strike King bait. And this is a awesome bait, and it is kind of a finessey approach. And I've been fishing this on Table Rock where there's 6 or 7 feet of water visibility. And whenever you have that wind at like 15 miles an hour, a lot of times, even then, those fish won't eat reaction baits as well as you would want them to. But what I can do is actually throw this swing head, or throw this Menace grub on a swing head. And so I'm taking this is a 4-inch Strike King Menace grub, the regular 4-inch size, throwing it in just a green pumpkin color. I just go straight green pumpkin. You don't need to use any. There's a lot of crazy colors, but just straight green pumpkin Menace grub, and I'm throwing that on a swing head. And so it doesn't really matter which swing head you're throwing, but what I will say is that I'm throwing that in the 3/4 ounce size. And so that's a really heavy swing head. And I'll throw that thing out there, let it sink to the bottom, and reel it in. You probably saw me doing that this summer a lot on Table Rock Lake, and they will eat this bait even as well as they will a shaky head or a drop shot at times. And you can cast that thing out there. It's heavy. You can reel it in and keep bottom contact really easily, even with that wind. And you can still get those fish that are kind of finicky to bite, because that Menace grub, it has a really finesse profile. So hopefully that answers your question right. That was kind of a lot there, but hopefully that all makes sense. Let's see if there's any questions over here. No one's asking any questions. You guys are very quiet tonight. Feel free to ask any questions too, guys, because I only have about 8 to 10 questions here on the Patreon page, and so I do want to make sure that I have some extra questions to fill up the hour, and I'm going to get off right at the hour, right at 8 o'clock tonight, because I have a lesson to do later this afternoon, but right after we get done actually. But the live chat here, the top chat and stuff like that, if you guys go in there and just put in a question, I'll make sure I get to that question. So even if you didn't ask it on the Patreon page, just leave it over here in the comments, like Park just did. And he's asking, will you rip wrap with finesse baits? Definitely. One of my favorite baits to throw on rip wrap is just a classic Zoom trick worm, and this is something that I fish a ton around rip wrap. And I'm just throwing a 6-inch Zoom trick worm, and I will fish that in the exact same place I throw a crankbait, I throw a jig, stuff like that. And a lot of times I'll fish it, or a lot when you have riprap or on the bridge, because whenever you have a situation where, let me pull up a map here of a lake. For example, I am way over here down south on Lake Falcon. Let me get up here. So let's say that you're fishing on a lake, like let's say Lake Dardanelle. This is a really muddy image of Dardanelle. It's normally not this bad. Let's say you're fishing around a bridge like this. A lot of times these bridges are really great places to catch fish, but they're big community holes. And this is all riprap around this bridge. And so a lot of guys are going to come through here, especially in the wintertime, with like Alabama rigs, jerk baits, crankbaits. In the summertime, guys with those squirrel crankbaits, and they'll fish a lot of spinner baits and jigs down these areas. And a lot of times, if I'm struggling in a tournament day, I'll just pick up that shaky head with like a 1/8 ounce or a 3/16 ounce jig head and work down behind a lot of these boats. And usually you can pick up a keeper or two on really, really tough days. And that saved my butt in a lot of tournaments, especially when I was younger, when I didn't have as many fish found and I just needed to find some places that had, or just find ways to catch fish in general. A shaky head around riprap is a great way to just put fish in the boat, even if a bunch of people are fishing there. So hopefully that answers the question part. Let me jump back over here to Patreon and see what the next questions are. So Tom Day, Tom saying, the most efficient jig arsenal, we have structure, swim, flipping, finesse. Rex on the primary ones to keep on hand in different situations. I know you like jigs, and I got a like as well. So if you want to talk about jigs, well, I can definitely talk about jigs. I can talk about jigs all day long. I love jig fishing. It's one of my favorite ways to fish. And so if we go over to the jigs, you can notice here, like, man, there's so many different jigs, and it's a little bit ridiculous how many different jig brands and things there are, because really a jig is a jig. It's a lead head with a hook and a weed guard. So it's not like you're going to get revolutionary with the different head designs, head shapes. A football jig's a football jig. There are like structured jigs or swim jigs, things like that, but one swim jig isn't that different from another swim jig. One football jig isn't that different from another football jig. But I just want to give you guys some general rules of thumb that I use when I'm looking at my jigs, and I normally keep 5 jigs. It still seems like a lot, but I use 5 jigs whenever I'm fishing, because that's kind of the easiest way for me to do it. If I just keep 5 jigs on hand, I'm going to be good to go. So first jig, as you guys know, is just a football jig, and one I've been using recently, just because they come in a 2-pack, which I really like, is, where are we at? Jewel. So the Jewel football jig, you get a 2-pack for $6, which is a pretty good deal. And I go through a lot of jigs. This is what I've been using, and so I'm just using that in the old school green purple. This one's been pretty good. And so just a regular football jig, you can use it in a 5/8 ounce, a 3/4 ounce. Those are my 2 sizes I usually use. Half ounce works as well. Half ounce or 5/8 ounce, and a 3/4 ounce football jig. Keep a couple of those at hand when you're fishing offshore or fishing a little bit deeper. That is my number one jig in general, especially if I'm fishing deeper than about 10 foot of water, and especially when I'm fishing in the summertime. So that's my first jig I like to use. And then the next jig that I always have on hand is some sort of finesse jig. And a finesse jig plays a lot more in the wintertime, so even like late fall through pre-spawn, so kind of October, November time, all the way through, let's say, early April, I have a finesse jig tied in hand. And sticking with the theme of the Jewel jigs, the Jewel jig I'm throwing recently that I love, and I actually just I talked about a little bit in the video. Where is that jig? Pee-wee. Jewel Pee-wee football jig. This thing is crazy, guys. I was a little bit skeptical at first. I saw them at a local tackle shop, and I was like, not really sure about them. They have a wire weed guard, and I wasn't sure if this was actually going to stop me from getting hung up, but this thing is so cool. It comes in a 3/16, a 5/16, and a 7/16 ounce. And these pictures do not do it justice. These jigs are tiny. They're really tiny, but they're in a decent size, that 5/16 or 7/16 ounce head. So you can maintain bottom contact, fish them out to 10, 15 foot of water even, and they're awesome. And I was actually, you'll see in my video I'm working on right now for my tournament day from 10 Killer. I know you guys are probably like, why have you not put that video out yet? And I've been working on it. Well, actually, I have not. I've been helping my mom with a lot of stuff and things like that, so I've not been working on the video as much as I should be. But obviously family comes first, so I've been focusing on that. But I got like 95% of that sorted now with my mom, so we should be good to go February, or we will be good to go. And so, but in my video, I went down one stretch of bank on Lake 10 Killer in that tournament day, and I caught like 12 fish in 15 minutes on this jig. It was every other cast. It was crazy. They were chewing this jig, and I was getting so many more bites with this jig than the other jigs I was throwing. I had a lot of different finesse jigs, the football jigs, and I tied this little tiny jig on, and they got so many bites. And it's not just because it's like this brand or whatever, it's just the size of it is so tiny. And so that's kind of a really great jig to have tied on. I'd have a 3/16 and a 5/16 version on hand. And then if it's really windy, you can even go to a 7/16 ounce size. And I was throwing it in the touchdown color and the Hail Mary color, though I don't really think it matters too much. All these colors are pretty good. And so that was kind of the another jig I would have tied on. So that's the second one. For the third jig I would have going, I would have a swimming jig. And so let's see here, swim jigs. So there's a lot of swim jigs on the market. My personal favorite swim jig, one I've been using for years and years and years, I mean years and years and years, is the Strike King Hack Attack Heavy Cover Swim Jig. This jig is awesome. This is one of my favorite confidence baits. I throw this jig all the time, especially when you get into the summer and kind of like spawn through kind of August, so April through August in my region. Whenever those fish get in shallow grass or shallow cover, dirty water, I throw a 3/8 ounce and a 1/2 ounce Strike King Hack-Tech heavy cover swim jig. Love this bait. And I'll pair this with a Strike King Rage Craw. We'll talk about the trailers here in a second, but this swim jig is great. Anytime I'm fishing around shallow grass, it's also really good when I'm fishing around shallow rocks. It comes through rocks pretty well, actually. And it's kind of like my all-around go-to jig when I'm fishing shallow in the summertime and I'm not fishing in super heavy cover. And so I kind of use this as like a flipping jig as well, or a pitching jig when I'm fishing in lighter cover, just lay down, stuff like that. And it has a really nice stout hook on it. You can use 20-pound fluorocarbon and get some great hook sets. So this is my #1 jig. I use it in black and blue, and also I use it in the bluegill color. So kind of mix that up. I never use white swim jigs really, unless it's a shad spawn, by the way. And really that's just because I think that black bait is a little bit different color from what a lot of guys are throwing. A lot of guys throw white swim jigs, so I throw black and blue. I think it gives them a little bit different look, so it's kind of why I do that. And so the next one is a flipping jig, and I use the Strike King Hack-Attack heavy cover flipping jig, wherever that is. Probably this next rung of jigs. Here we go, Strike King Hack-Attack jig. This is I use a swim jig, and this is the regular Hack-Attack jig. And I use this jig when I'm trying to fish really thick cover. And I'm using this in either a 3/4 ounce, a 1 ounce, or a 1 1/4 ounce size. So when I want to punch into, let's say, thick grass beds, into lily pads, or deep offshore grass, I'm going to be using a heavy cover flipping jig. I'm using braid for this. This is the only jig I actually use braid on. And I'll go for, again, 3/4 ounce, 1 ounce, 1 1/4 ounce in black and blue, and then green pumpkin. And that's what I throw. Put a Strike King Rage Craw on the back of it, and I've caught some tanks on this jig. I love this jig as well. Don't throw it all that much because the situation doesn't always present itself. When it does, that jig can get some big ones in the boat. And I love catching them on that. And the last thing I'm going to have is a hair jig. And so a lot of different hair jigs on the market. One hair jig that you guys should buy if you want to get some hair jigs is actually this Nichols Ben Parker hair jig. It's been on sale since like June, and I made a video about this already. And there's still a bunch of them left in stock, this blue shad and this bombshell shad. And this is a great little hair jig, and I made videos about this as well already earlier this year. But a hair jig is an awesome way to catch suspended fish and a great way to catch offshore fish. So those are the 5 jigs I use. These are the 5 staples in my arsenal, and I pretty much in the summertime have almost all those jigs tied on, with the exception of the finesse jig in the summer. And then when I get into the winter, I still have a hair jig tied on, the finesse jig, the football jig. I don't really use the Hack-Attack swim jigs or the heavy cover jigs unless I'm fishing in a really grassy lake in the winter. Wow, lots of questions coming in too. So hopefully that was a long tangent on jigs, but there's so much to talk about with jigs. I love fishing jigs, guys. They're awesome. So let me see what we got here. Rapid fire here. Michael asks, Johnny, do you change treble hooks on lipless? If so, what hooks do you use? I always change treble hooks on every crankbait, no matter the brand. Even if it's like a Megabass or a Lucky Craft or even a Spro crankbait, I always change treble hooks just because the stock treble hooks aren't always the best. And so what I use usually is the Gamakatsu extra wide gap. Where we at? Where'd you go? Well, they're here. I'm going blind. Where are these hooks? Oh, here you go. Haha. The Gamakatsu EWG treble short shank 2X Magic Eye. This is the treble hook I use. I normally use it in either a size 2. If I'm using like a Strike King Red Eye Shad and a 1/2 ounce. If I'm using a 1 ounce, I might go to a size 1 or even a 1/0. And then I also will use this sometimes on really small lipless crankbaits and go to a size 4 hook. And so these are great treble hooks, and with a lipless crankbait, a lot of times those fish have a tendency to throw the bait a little bit more, in my experience, than even a square bill crankbait. So I like to have these hooks that have a little bit more bite to them and are a little bit thicker, and actually use a heavier rod. The rod I'm using, let me grab my rod. This rod real quick is Got all kinds of rods over here. Is these Tour KVD. This is a 7-foot medium crankbait rod. It's a pretty heavy blank, like in terms of like weight. It also is a pretty heavy action. The rod doesn't really start bending till about a quarter of the way up the rod, and so it has a lot of backbone, and you really need those extra strong short shank hooks to take advantage of this crankbait rod. And Kevin Van Dam designed them for these exact types of hooks. And so if you use, like, let's say this Gamakatsu light wire hook, like a regular EWG hook here, without the 2X and the short shank, these hooks, if you're using that stout KVD rod, will pull the hooks out of the fish. And so you need to be using those a little bit stouter hooks. But when I'm throwing a lipless crankbait, that is what I'm fishing. And these hooks right here. Let's see here. Kevin is saying, do you have any confidence in red colored crankbaits in the early spring? What water temperatures do you start throwing them? I love red crankbaits. I think David Dudley made a video about that. I didn't really watch it, but red crankbaits are good. And I basically throw red in my crankbaits all winter long, starting about November, maybe into December, all the way through March. And so I really like a red crankbait from November through March. I don't know why it's good. I know that the crawfish bite gets really good in those water temperatures, and so that's probably part of it. But I'm not really sure exactly. I can't give you a specific reasoning behind it, but I throw a lot of red crankbaits, lipless crankbaits, red square bill crankbaits, deep diving crankbaits even. And the only exception to that of using a red crankbait, let me pull up a striking red actually, just because I know the colors in that bait. A lot of times you'll be throwing like a brown craw or like a chili craw, like a red. And I'll do that whenever the water clarity is 2 feet of visibility or more. And then whenever I get to 2 foot of water visibility or less, I like to go with more of a chartreuse pattern. So I'll actually go to a chartreuse like blueback, chartreuse blackback, or even like a chartreuse red craw, something with that yellow in it. When you get that dirtier water, it really helps you get a lot more bites. And so usually I go for a little bit of chartreuse in my baits in the winter time when it's really dirty water, but most of the other time it's just a red bait, and that's the way to go. Kevin also is asking, speaking of Jewel jigs, what is the story on the jig you're working on with them? Yes, I'm working on a jig with Jewel actually, and that is kind of cool. The national sales manager actually owns a local tackle shop right by my apartment, and so I was just talking to him just because I go in there to buy fishing lures, and he showed me this like jig that they're making. It's kind of this prototype jig that they sell in the shop, but it hasn't really taken off because it's kind of a unique jig. And so it is actually a jig designed for fishing in brush piles and fishing in really thick cover. And so we're going to be trying to get that jig out. We wanted to try to get it out for the Classic, Bassmaster Classic this year, but maybe by ICAST, something like that, we're going to try to get this jig put out. And I fished this jig. It's just a football jig with a special weed guard. And I fished this jig in brush piles for 3 days in a row on Sam Rayburn Lake for my bass camp, and I only lost 2 jigs in 3 days of fishing, and I probably fished 50 to 60 brush piles. Insane. It's absolutely insane how good this jig is in brush piles. I'm not going to say it's the best jig or it's that different for fishing in rock piles or random other situations, but if you're fishing brush piles, this is the jig to get. And so we'll be putting that jig out on the market hopefully here soon, and it'll be a Fish the Moment branded jig. And so I'm really excited about it actually, just because it works so well and it's different from kind of what's on the market right now. It's not just another football jig like everyone else has. And so I'll be talking about it more in videos. And again, it is a situational bait. So if you're fishing brush piles, it's a great jig. If not, then it's just like any other football jig on the market if you're not fishing brush piles. So I'm not going to try to sell it as like the best bait in the whole world, but it is really cool for brush piles. So I'll let you guys know more about that. Then Clint says, I love jigs and I make my own this so I can change the skirt color and have been having good luck with it. Let's see here. He says if you catch this fish and their lips are red, I tie in a jig with red craw and had good results. That's pretty cool. Do you fish a swim jig different than a standard jig? Yeah, so a swim jig, really what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be working my rod a lot more. So I'm going to basically try to keep that bait within 2 to 3 feet of the surface, maybe a foot of the surface, and really be pumping my rod, like pulling that jig through, stopping it, letting it fall, and then swimming it. Literally just trying to swim it up and down through the grass or through any type of cover, usually through grass though. Let's see here. Marshall, sorry I'm late. This will be available later. Correct. Yeah, Marshall, I'll have this up on the YouTube or on the Patreon page after this. And then Thor's asking Johnny, quick question. First, sorry for your loss. Tough break. Appreciate that. Are you still planning to release a winter fishing playbook? So I was planning on working on that, and I just have not had time to get to that. And at this point, my plan was to do it, and I probably at this point am too late for a lot of guys. Some guys I know it's still like frozen over, but a lot of guys it's already through the winter time for like guys down in Texas, for example. And so what I'm planning on doing in February is creating a pre-spawn playbook, and then I'll be making a spawning playbook, post-spawn playbook, summer playbook, fall playbook, and then winter playbook. So we'll catch it on the back end next year. And so those playbooks take a long time to make. Usually I'm planning on putting about 30 to 50 hours into that playbook to make it really, really good. One thing that I do have that you guys are going to love that I'm really excited about is actually a rod recommendation guide. And so it's really, really cool. Actually, let me do this real quick. I'm going to show you guys. I'm actually going to have this on my website. I plan on just selling it for just a little bit of money just to kind of recoup the time, because I actually bought like 10 fishing rods to get this done. And so I spent more money than I was expecting to test out all these fishing rods. And so I just put a lot of time in making the graphics and stuff. So I'm gonna sell it on my website for, like not very much, just enough to kind of recoup hopefully my cost for the rods and break even on it. But let me pull this up, because I think you guys are gonna really like this. It's pretty cool. I'm not gonna show you all of it, but I'm just gonna show you the first little deal here and give you a tease of what this looks like, because I think you guys are going to really like this. And so let me get this out of here. Okay. Because I don't want to give it all away, because otherwise it kind of defeats the purpose here. But this is kind of what it's going to look like. This is just one little, from one page of it. Basically, the idea is that I am going to give my recommendation for every single style of bait that I fish. So for example, an offshore jig and worm, different size baits, 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce, 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce, and what action rod I use. So 7-foot medium heavy, 7.2 medium heavy, 7'4" heavy action rod. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to list this out for literally every bait that I ever throw, and I'm going to count how many times, for example, a 7'2" medium heavy comes up or a 7'4" heavy comes up, and I'm going to list my best rods based on the number of applications I use them for. So I actually have this already done. I spent some time on this because I was really pumped about it one night. I don't know why. I stayed up 3 a.m. doing this one night. Just get it started. Then I had to go give recommendations, because I wanted to give you recommendations on rods that are $100. And then I tried to use rods that were $50. Those were not very good. Then I also I tried to get rods $100 mark. So I tested a bunch of different rods to see what was good. And I basically gave you an idea of my top 4 rods in terms of length and action based on how many applications I use them for. And then I also basically listed some brands that I think are good for each of those applications. So really cool guide. I think that it's going to be a really cool deal that you guys are going to like a lot. And so that's kind of the goal. But again, I went a little bit crazy buying rods, so I'm going to just put it up on my website for a little bit for I think $10 or something. I'm not really sure. I haven't got that far yet in my brain, but this is just one tiny excerpt of it, and I'll talk more about it here on my videos and stuff. But just so you guys know, it's kind of what I've been doing. So let's see here. Let's see. Marshall's asking, what's the difference in a rattle trap and a lipless crankbait? They look the same. So rattle trap, lipless crankbait, just the same way. It's a different way to say the same thing. So it's just different terminology. So here is your, where's the, what? Oh, here we go. That's not a lipless crankbait. It was showing a picture of a crawdad for lipless crankbait. Lipless crankbait, the same thing. You'll hear people call them rattle traps. You might have people call them traps. That's what I call them. When I'm fishing in Arkansas, I'm trap fishing a trap, which means I'm fishing a rattle trap, which means I'm fishing a lipless crankbait. But the rattle trap is the brand name, or the brand name basically for the Bill Lewis rattle trap. Lipless crankbait's the generic name, and then everyone in Arkansas calls it a trap. Johnny, do you fish the Ned rig? No, I don't fish spinning rods. No, I'm just kidding. I do throw Ned rig a little bit. It's pretty cool. I like it, but I catch just as many fish on a finesse jig, and most of the time, I find other ways to catch them that's not fishing a Ned rig. I just really don't like doing it. And then Trailer on the little jig, Park is asking. Let me see here. We go to the soft baits, and then actually this is probably easier. Super Chunk. On the little jig, I use the Zoom Super Chunk Junior. So Zoom Super Chunk Junior, and I just throw a little green pumpkin purple, or a pumpkin, or like a watermelon red, something like that in the back of those jigs. And this junior size is perfect. And one thing, guys, is actually one way you could help me out a little bit, just as my Patreon guys, know you guys like to support the channel. If you guys are picking up any of these baits I'm talking about on Tackle Warehouse, one thing you can do is actually go to my website, and if you go over to fishthemoment.com, you can go over to support Fish the Moment, and then you can click on the Tackle Warehouse link here. And this is actually my affiliate link for Tackle Warehouse. And so if you click on this, it takes you to a page that's specifically for me. And so if you use this page, I get credit for any baits that you purchase and get a small cut of the profit. And what you can actually do is just go in and actually bookmark or favorite this link. After you click the link on my website, it'll take you there, and you can see on Tackle Warehouse, usually it's tacklewarehouse.com, but now it's Tackle Warehouse / from = Fish the Moment. So if you bookmark that and just save that in your desktop or whatever, or on your bookmark bar, every single time now you go to Tackle Warehouse, from here, you go to my Fish the Moment page, and then anything you buy, I get a little bit of credit for. So it's an easy thing to do. Just takes 5 seconds to bookmark that page, and then you don't have to forget, like, oh man, I forgot to, use Johnny's link or whatever. So just something, if you guys could do that, it would help me out. But anyways, getting back to this. Johnny, on treble hook changes, do you ever use red hooks? If so, then when and why? I don't. I haven't really experimented with that too much. I don't think it makes that big of a difference. I think that bait's moving fast enough that those fish are not really going to see it. Also, I think that the bait's digging into the bottom so much that those hooks are going to be down on the bottom anyways. The only time it might make a difference is maybe with a jerk bait, when that bait is just sitting there suspended, but I haven't really messed around with that too much. Let's see here. And then Richard said, I have a new combo I would have sent you to review. No worries, Richard. I'm good. I got my tax write-off off of it. That's why I'm justifying it to myself. So I'm able to write all that tackle off for taxes. So hopefully that is a wise decision. It didn't seem like it was that bad, and hopefully, again, I can recoup a little bit of it. And I also got to get some new fishing rods for 2020, so it all works out in the end. It's all good. A lot of times I do stuff like that, guys. Like, for example, the gloves. A lot of guys are like, I really want those gloves. I really didn't make any money on those gloves. I basically broke even, and the reason I did that is because I like the gloves a lot. I bought some, and I was going to get them screen printed, and I could just get a better rate if I just screen printed them in bulk. And so I was like, well, I might as well just buy the gloves and then sell some if guys want them. And they sold out immediately. And those gloves I literally bought at the store, and they're out of stock now, completely discontinued, and I didn't make a single dollar off those gloves. And so it's one of those things where a lot of stuff I like to do is just to help you guys out. I'm not really in it that much for like the money and trying to get rich off of YouTube. I just do this because I love sharing information with you guys. Obviously, I want to make a living and support my family and continue to do this for the long term, but at the same time, I'm not out here trying to scrape every single penny from you guys, because for me, that's just not really... There's a lot of guys that are doing that or that do that out there already. And for me, I feel like if I just keep putting out good content over the course of time, I'm still going to do well. And yeah, I might not be as rich as I would if I was doing some like really aggressive tactics or whatever, but again, that's just not me. That's not the way I operate. So just so you guys know on that. So question from Marshall: Do you have any plans to do videos on LiveScope? If I do get my hands on a boat with live scope where I can actually go film for the day, yes. Right now my boat doesn't have live scope, and so if I have a friend that gets live scope for something, I will go out in their boat and do a video on it. But for now, I've not had the chance. And then Bob Schiller says, "What's the lowest water temperature that you have fished this winter?" Lowest temperature I fished was like 43, 42 degrees, 43. It was up one of the rivers in Table Rock. It was really cold after some cold rains. And you can still catch fish in that water temperature. I've caught them on the Arkansas River one year, 39-degree water temperatures. And it was muddy water. It was not fun fishing, but I caught them on the jerk bait and the crankbait. And you can still catch fish really cold. Water temperature, really the biggest thing is that the colder the temperature gets, the slower you're going to have to fish. That's pretty much the deal. When water temperatures are 48 degrees and above, you can fish pretty quick. You can still use moving bait, stuff like that. And then once that water temperature gets into like the 45 degree and less, you have to like sit there with a jerk bait and just like twitch it and let it sit for 15 seconds. Or the crankbait. Cast the thing out there and turn your handle. Just barely turn that bait to keep it down on the bottom. That's how you have to fish those baits to get the bites. So that is that. Let me go over to some of these questions over here and see. So Brandon says, curious about how sensitive the Quantum Smoke Rod is compared to the other rods. Thinking about buying one for jigs. Brandon, I really like that Quantum Smoke Rod. Comparing it to the other rods I've been using in the $150 mark, I would say it's just as good as any of the other rods in that range. And I feel like it's very sensitive. I like it. Biggest thing I like about it is that it doesn't have micro guides, and it also has a very good guides itself, so the inserts aren't falling out on me, and the blank seems very sensitive. And so I like the Quantum Smoke Rods a lot. I don't know. I haven't gone and bought like a $300 or $400 G Loomis or something like that. So I'm sure there are more sensitive rods, but for me, they get the job done. I feel a lot of bites. Now, I was using a $50 Abu Garcia rod from Walmart. Those rods are terrible. Like I literally couldn't feel a fish biting my jig until it literally pulled the rod like out of my hand. And you saw it in my last video. So those $50 rods, no. $100 rods even are a little bit sketchy. $79 to $100 rods are a little bit sketchy. Getting up to that $100 mark, kind of $100 plus, that's the sweet spot I found for rods. They're kind of where you need to be sitting. Marcia says, I'll bring my boat. How about 10 killer? For sure. Well, shoot me a message, shoot me an email. I actually changed my email, guys. If you want to, Marshall, just shoot it to johnny@fishthemoment.com. I just switched this over today. I was really excited. I've been meaning to do this for so long. And so johnny@fishthemoment.com. And I finally got like an official email. It's not fishthemoment1@gmail.com. I'm shocked someone had fishthemoment@gmail.com already. But now I'm johnny@fishthemoment.com. Got my email forwarding on. I am feeling good for 2020. Let's see here. What were we looking at? Oh, we're looking at Patreon questions. Next up, Miles is asking, when fish start schooling, it always seems like they're a little further away than I can cast a lure. What baits do you use for schooling fish? Do you have any extra heavy baits that cast further and will reach them? Or any advice to help us cast further? Or do you just have to let the trolling motor go on high and track them down? So, couple things on that. As far as the fish showing up out of range, that's just classic schooling fish. Usually what I like to do is I have a couple different baits. Schooling fish in particular, I throw 3 baits on. The number one bait that I'm going to throw is some sort of big walking bait. I want something that it's a heavy topwater bait. And usually I'm throwing it like for example, like a Lucky Craft gunfish, like a big gunfish, 117. Kind of looks like a pencil popper almost. Pencil poppers in general, like a bigger, that's not what I'm looking for. That's not the gunfish. Let me see if I can find what I'm talking about. There's probably a whole section of them down here. But for something like this 175, like that's a big bait. That's way too big. But you guys get the picture. Something like this, here's a 135. So 135 centimeter, these big topwater walking baits. And I'm going to be putting this on like a 7'6" rod with braided lines. So I want something with braided lines so I can cast that thing far. I put it on a 7'6" rod so I can fire that thing a long distance. And really the key to casting a long distance, guys, one is your actual mechanics, which I'll make a video on here probably next month. But on top of the mechanics, it's matching up the bait weight to the appropriate rod action. And so there is a sweet spot for the correct action of fishing rod and the correct weight for your bait. And so I plan on making a video about that as well. That's something I have on my agenda to do, and kind of just do some testing on that of what is the actual weight that's best in terms of the rod action, and what can I get the most distance out of based on like a 7-foot medium heavy action rod versus a 7'2" medium heavy action rod versus a 7'6" heavy action rod with different weight baits. And so just something though, 7'6" rod for me, which is going to be a 7'6" heavy with braided line with this big topwater bait. I can cast the thing a mile and I can get to those big schooling fish, or schooling fish that are further away. And then if I do get some fish to come up in range, one thing I'm throwing a lot is a Strike King caffeine shad. So Strike King caffeine shad is a great bait. And I'm throwing this in the 4-inch size. This is the regular size, the Caffeine Shad Junior. And I put this on a little spinning rod and a 5/0 Gamakatsu extra rod gap hook. And this bait is awesome for schooling fish. You can fire that thing out there. And the way I fish it is I fire it out into those schooling fish. Again, the spinning rod, I can cast it a little bit further. And I'm just going to basically let that thing fall through those schooling fish. And if they don't bite it immediately, I'm going to burn the reel handle 5 or 6 times and then kill it. And that bait will fall back down, and then usually they'll eat it then, or I'll burn it 5 or 6 times, kill it, and then usually they'll just crush this thing. This is a great bait for schooling fish. Underutilized bait, fluke in general. I love fishing a fluke, and this caffeine shad is my favorite one. And then the last thing that y'all throw on schooling fish that I really picked up on this last year on Lake Ouachita is throwing a spy bait. And so a spy bait for schooling fish this year was my number one way to catch them. There's a lot of these schooling fish that seem really finicky and seem like they were really pressured, and I could actually throw a spy bait through them and get a lot more bites. And I would have, in lessons, have guys throwing a walking bait, a pop bar, a fluke, all kinds of stuff, not getting bit, and I would throw this little spy bait behind them, and I would outcatch them 5-1 on schooling fish. It was crazy. So spy bait's a pretty good deal for that too. Let's see if any other questions coming in. How would you rate Dardanelle as a bass lake? Dardanelle is my favorite lake to fish, period. I love it. It has great fishing. It's so pressured nowadays, though, that it's just a little bit tough to even find a spot to fish. So Dardanelle is a tough lake just because there's so much pressure. But it's one of the most versatile lakes in the country for bass fishing. You can fish offshore ledges. You can fish shallow grass. You can go flip laydowns. You can fish riprap. You can fish deep clear water back in the strip pits. Run up the lake and fish lily pads. You can fish coontail grass. You can run way up the lake and fish sandbar drops and fish in the backs of creeks. And so it's just a super diverse lake, and I caught them pretty much every way you could think about catching fish. Plus it has man-made current, which will make the fish act like Tennessee River bass, like offshore ledge fishing bass certain times of the year. So I love Lake Dardanelle. It's a challenging fishery. It took me a long time to learn, but now that I understand it, it is a great place to fish. And then what is your technique to fish the spy bait? Basically what I'm doing is I'm just putting down 6-pound fluorocarbon line, straight fluorocarbon, because if you tie it to that braid leader, sometimes that braid leader will catch, especially when I'm trying to whip that thing out there, and sometimes I'll break the spy bait off. So I go 6 pounds straight fluorocarbon, and then I just cast the thing out there, let it sink for 2-3 seconds, and I just barely turn that reel handle super slow. As slow as you can reel that handle, the better, and usually they'll eat that thing. But the key is you don't want to overpower the bait where it's going you want the thing just barely wobble back and forth, and so you just have to reel that thing as slow as you possibly can. Let it sink for a couple seconds. A lot of times just barely reeling that thing will cause it to kind of dip. It'll kind of go like this. It'll enter the water. Go over here. It'll enter the water like this, and then it'll just kind of pendulum down, and then it'll hit its bottom, and it'll come back up like that. And that's kind of the trajectory of that bait. And so, killer bait. I love that spy bait. It's really good. Let's see what else we got here. Another question from Ray. Regarding Tom's question about jigs. Also had whether or not you trim the skirts on a regular / finesse jig When, why, how much does it matter? I always trim my jig skirts, guys, when I'm trimming a jig, regardless of which jig I'm throwing. And my rule of thumb, we can just pull up literally any jig. I want to trim that jig skirt be a 1/4 inch from the hook, bottom of that hook bend. So 1/4 inch out, so like right about here on that hook bend. I'm going to cut that skirt. The reason for that is because that trailer, I want to fall so that the legs, the appendages, whatever, are sticking out past the skirt. If you put your trailer on this jig right here, that, let's say you're fishing a rage craw, all those trailers are going to get caught up in the skirt itself, and you're not actually going to take advantage of the action of that trailer. It's pretty much useless. And so what I like to do is cut that skirt a 1/4 inch from the hook bend and then put my trailer on, and I'll cut my trailer down just enough so that the pincers, or the actual like appendages, are sticking below the skirt. So I want the rage craw claws to be past the skirt, if that makes sense. Let's see here. Brandon asks, let's see here. Oh no, Marshall's asking, it'd be great if you explain the basic fundamentals of fishing tournament, like how to find them, and how many fish do I need to catch? How much does it usually cost? Do I need a partner? Also, am I good enough? And so that is a great question, and I think that is going to probably be the last question of the stream, because it's going to take me a little bit here. Looks like we're pretty much getting close here. But we got one more question from Michael. I'll hit your question here, Michael, too. But in terms of tournament goes, usually what I do is I just go in and I just Google fishing tournaments in my area. For me, like I'll look up like the FLW BFL. So you can go up here and you can type in FLW BFL. And then if you look up the FLW Bass Fishing League, you can see here that, see here, you can look up FLW BFL, BFL, BLW? What am I doing? FL schedule, BLW, what am I? I'm FLW BLW. I don't know what I'm doing, guys. But you can go through here and you can actually get your tournament schedules. BFLs right now are kind of a higher tier of the league, so I wouldn't say this is a great place to start, for example. Here we go, this is where it's at. So you can actually go through here and you can do the Phoenix Bass Fishing League, and you can find all these tournaments with dates, and you have to join FLW to do this. You can do it's like a $200 entry fee, which is kind of expensive, and it's an individual tournament. But you can qualify, or you can go in as a co-angler, and that's kind of how I would actually recommend starting as a tournament angler. If you don't have a lot of experience, go in as a co-angler on a BFL. It's only $100 to enter, and you can actually go in the boat with some local guys who are good at bass fishing, and you can see how they fish, how many spots they fish, how they actually catch their fish. And even if you don't catch that much, it's a great learning experience. And I fished as a co-angler for a long time, from when I was about 14 till I was about 17, just to learn and kind of get a feel for tournament bass fishing. And once you then kind of get your feet under you, do a co-angler in a couple BFLs or a couple different tournaments in your area, one thing you can do is actually go to your local tackle shop. So just go to a local tackle shop that's like an actual like fishing store. Don't go to like Academy Sports or whatever. Go to like an actual tackle shop. And what you can do is go ask, are there any local team tournaments? Are there any local individual tournaments that I can fish? And like in my area, there's an individual trail and there's a team trail. And entry fees usually vary from, let's say, $50 up to $200 for those tournaments. So there are different price ranges. And then if you aren't ready to just throw your money into the ring and fish against all the best people on your lake, what you can do is you can actually try to join a federation club. So there's the TBF, the Bass Federation. There's also the Bass Nation, which is the Bass Federation. And both of those are great places to learn. A lot of these bass clubs will have, or the Bass Nation, the FLW Federation tournaments, they'll have clubs where they'll have 10 to 15 guys who just get together on the weekends. They just fish. You can fish in the back of the guys' boats. You can also, like as a co-angler, you can also fish with your own boat. And usually the entry fees are only going to be anywhere from $20 to $50. low stakes, and a lot of these guys will actually share information with you. It's a very friendly atmosphere, and that's kind of how I grew up fishing actually junior clubs, where there was these junior clubs attached to these BASS and FLW federation clubs, and so the adults would kind of sponsor the juniors. And so it's a great way to get kids involved in fishing, but it's also just a great way to get started. And again, if you want information on that, just go to your local tackle shop, ask for the local FLW Federation Club or the Bass Federation Club, Bass Nation Club, and they'll have information about that. Again, just go to the actual fishing tackle store, and that will be helpful. So let's see here. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. And are you good enough to fish tournaments? No one's good enough to fish tournaments ever. Fishing a lot of times is just really tough. And so I would say I'm even good enough to be fishing tournaments and consistently doing well. Hopefully I'll be doing okay in my tournaments coming up. Actually, I'm fishing a couple of these BFLs if you guys want to come fish against me and kick my butt. I'm going to be fishing the, not near the Arky stuff. Where am I going to fish? I'm fishing the Okies. So we're fishing this Grand Lake March 21st. I think I'm going to throw my hat in the ring on this one. And then I'm also going to fish this Grand Lake October 3rd. And I might try to fish this February 29th. Or I might fish... Actually, I'm probably going to fish this one because I'm going to fish a Beaver Lake one on Beaver Lake Elite Series March 7th. And then I'm going to fish this BFL here on Grand. And then I'm not really sure... I don't want to go up to Lake of the Ozarks, but I might just make a trip just for fun in September up to Lake of the Ozarks and fish brush piles. So I'm going to try to fish anywhere from 3 to 4 BFLs, and I have an 8 tournament series I want to fish. So anywhere from 10 to 12 tournaments this year. And so that's kind of my plan. And so fishing tournaments is fun. Again, recommend going first as a co-angler in some of these bigger tournaments to get a feel for what the best anglers are doing in like a BFL, being a co-angler. And then also joining a federation club is a great way to kind of get your feet wet in tournament fishing as well. Okay, so last thing... questions here. One more question. Oh, here you go. Michael's asking, Johnny, do you throw a Nico rig? If so, what situation that has got you to it? I have not fished a Nico rig. I feel like Nico rig would be good. I need to get better at finesse fishing. That's probably what I'm going to have to do a lot in my upcoming tournaments, guys, is the, I don't know, I need to probably get better at putting spinning rods in the deck of the boat, especially in tournaments, to put a limit in the boat, especially with a lot of guys on the water. And so I probably will be doing a lot more finesse stuff, and you'll see me doing that a lot more this year in preparation for these tournaments and probably just practicing. Like, I'm going to practice my finesse game a little bit, especially on Beaver Lake, Table Rock Lake, those places. When there's a lot of pressure, there's going to be like sometimes 300-400 boats on the lake fishing. I'm going to need to get better at those finesse techniques, the wacky rig worms, the Nico rigs, the Ned rigs. That's the stuff that I need to get better at. That's really my weakness. Not really a weakness, it's just I never do it, so I don't know the situations to go to it. So I guess it is a weakness. So I'm definitely going to work on that. And then Bob's asking, have you ever fished a Big Bass Bash? I have not. I have a superstition about that because every time I have fished the same weekend as the Big Bass Bash, I've caught a fish that's big enough to win the entire pool on Lake Dardanelle twice. 2 times I've done this. My superstition is if I enter the Big Bass Bash, I'm not going to actually catch a fish at all. I'm just going to waste my money. And I don't know why I have this hang up about big bass tournaments. I have never fished them. I would rather fish an actual club tournament or a local tournament, put my money there, because I feel like I'd have a better shot of actually winning money. But I always do that. I always don't fish the big bass, and I go out that weekend to say, oh, what if I just went out here and tried to fish? And I caught a 6-pounder one year on Lake Dardanelle, which would have won me the entire thing. And then I think I wouldn't have won one year. I think I caught a 580 the other year, and it got me second by ounces. And so, yeah, I probably should fish the Big Bass Bash, but I just haven't. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's it for the stream. I really enjoyed talking with everyone today. I got through all the questions, which I'm really excited about. Right on time, actually, as well. So I am really glad that everyone could join, and hope you guys are enjoying the Patreon content that's coming out. And I also appreciate, again, your patience as I kind of work through everything else in my personal life. And really right now, I have finished up, again, everything going on in my personal life. And now I'm just putting the pieces back together for my business after my bass camp and everything too. I had to prep for that. So I'm trying to get a little bit ahead on video production, trying to get everything else squared away, like taxes, all that stuff for the year, so that once February hits, I can focus on fishing 2 to 3 days a week, putting out 3+ videos every single week, making Patreon videos for you guys, all kinds of stuff. And so I'm really excited for 2020. I am finally going to be able to get back to what I love doing, which is making YouTube videos and talking fishing with you guys. And so I, again, really appreciate all the support that allows me to do this every single day for a living. And I definitely want to make sure I give back to you guys as much as I can because of that. And so, again, really excited for 2020. And other than that, I will see you guys probably in the next Patreon-only video for a lot of you guys. For all my bronze backers and up, I'll be putting out a Patreon-only video. And then for the rest of you guys, February 1st, I'm going to be dropping a brand new video, which will be that second part of that 10 killer tournament video. Then I'll be pumping out a bunch of other videos going forward and have a lot of cool stuff in store for you guys. You guys are going to love it. So thanks again, guys, for checking out the video tonight and check out the stream. And I'll see y'all in the next video.